In this final episode of the Teardown scripting tutorial, we'll cover some more advanced topics like asset paths and the different callback functions. All scripting functions that load assets, like load sprite or load sound, uses the same system. It starts by searching the same folder as the script itself is located in. So if you put an audio file in the same folder as the Lua script, you can always load that using just the file name. If you want to load from a specific folder in your mod, you can use the mod prefix. Note that you must use capital letters. The mod prefix will expand to your mod folder and it will work no matter if it's a local mod or subscribed from Steam. As a fallback, most asset functions also search a predefined path for standard assets in the game's data folder. For instance, in the case of load sound, the game will search the data SND folder. If you take a look in the game's data folder, you'll notice that a lot of files end in .tde. This means that the asset uses third-party licensed material and had to be encrypted for legal reasons. You can still use these files in your mod, just load them as you normally would, but omit the TDE extension. Teardown will automatically look for it if the regular file wasn't found. We've already talked about the init, tick, and draw functions. Init is called only once when the level starts. Tick is called once at the beginning of each frame, and this is where you usually handle input and gameplay logic. Draw is called at the end of each frame and is normally used to draw overlay graphics and user interfaces. But there's one more callback that we haven't talked about yet, the update function. To understand how it's different from tick, we first need to understand timesteps. Let's print out the timestep, which is passed in as an argument to the tick function. You'll see that the timestep varies slightly every frame, and it's also dependent on your frame rate. If you, for instance, disable vertical sync, the timestep becomes smaller as the computer renders more frames per second. If we add an update callback and do the same thing from there, we'll see that the timestep is exactly the same for every call, 1/60th of a second, regardless of frame rate. This is called a fixed timestep, and it's often very desirable in simulation. The engine keeps track of the time and calls update only when needed. This means that in some cases, update isn't called at all during the entire frame. In other cases, there can be multiple calls during a single frame. Let's visualize this by printing the timestep for both tick and update. If we use vertical sync on a 60Hz monitor, the call order will usually be one update between every tick. If we instead lock to 30 frames per second, we can see that the update is called twice every frame. And if we disable vertical sync, update is just called once in a while, depending on how fast your computer is. This is why you should never handle input from the update callback, because a button press can easily be missed if the update wasn't called that particular frame. In order to avoid corner cases, the timestep is internally capped to 1/30th of a second. This means that the update function will never be called more than twice per frame. If your frame rate drops lower than that, the game will simply move in slow motion. Unless you know exactly what you're doing, I recommend using only the tick function. But if you start seeing weird behavior that depends on the frame rate, your code might assume a fixed timestep, and you could try moving things over to the update function. Teardown uses Lua version 5.1, which is an older version of the language. This can be good to know if you read tutorials online that may cover features not available in this version. You should also be aware that some of the built-in Lua functions are not available in Teardown for security reasons. There is, for instance, no way to read or write files or start executables. The only Lua libraries enabled in Teardown are math, string, and table. That concludes the Teardown scripting tutorial. If you need help or just want to discuss modding with others, join the official Teardown Discord server. There's a link in the description below. Thank you for listening and good luck with the modding.